figuring out whatever your personal living richly blueprint is. What are those things that really enrich your life? It's about building a life you don't need to escape from.
Hi, I'm Rob Dale, and welcome to the Living Richly podcast. I'm here with Trefor Munvan and Eric Deschamps, and we have been talking about living your best life. We have been exploring a little bit of the ideas around what that means. We've had an opportunity to share our stories, and if you haven't had a chance to go back and listen to those, I do encourage you. It'll give you a little bit of a sense of why two ex-preachers and a farmer are even having these conversations, and what brought us to this point that we are really on a journey together. And thank you for joining us and being a part of the journey with us. We're calling this episode Creating Your Best Life.
Very, very ambitious title.
Huge when you think about words matter, right, Trevor? And there's a lot to unpack when you call both the creating, best life, all of those things. Some thoughts that come to mind as to where we want to go in our conversations today.
Yeah, with this title, our risk of under delivering has gone up.
Right, the pressure to deliver is on.
Yeah. Right, well, we've talked about basically the notion of like, is this the life you want to live? Right, and so there's a part where we need to look and go. So if this is your life, if this is your trajectory going forward, are you good?
Right.
And I think for most people, the answer is actually no. Most of the people we run into, we chat with. I mean, I think there's enough evidence about that. We can be pretty confident. So then the question is, well, what do you do about it? Right. And we've shared our stories about what we have been doing about it and what that's looked like. And that work's never done. It's never done. But there's things that keep revealing itself to us along the way. And I think today we want to talk a little bit about what some of those things are. But that word create really does matter.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't just arrive.
It's a process. It's a deliberate choice.
Yeah.
There's a choosing that happens in it.
Yeah, it's not a waiting exercise, it's a choosing exercise. And I think a lot of us, I know for sure for me for a long time, waiting, stuck, afraid, resistant, like all of that stuff would show up, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think there's a point where we really can create what we want to have, but we actually have to get clear on what do you want to have, right, as part of that as well.
Well, and even, go back to episode 1, and I think
those were good days.
Those were good
really,
days.
Those are so much.
Has changed.
I felt so much closer to you back then. We even used the language of if somebody was to ask you the question, are you living your best life? Does that haunt you?
Right.
And there really does come almost at the starting of this journey is a recognition or an admission that maybe I'm not. And I don't feel like I am. And part of what spurred this whole conversation and this journey for us was the fact that so many of the people that we interact with who are incredibly successful in their industries and their crafts, doing great
Not about
things.
Success.
Right.
And yet are feeling a sense of, I'm not living my best life. And a lot of those kind of conversations was what started it, not just our own journeys, but the conversations we had with others.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's this notion of, we've used this language before, of winners who are losing. This concept of I'm succeeding in certain parts of my life, but there are other parts of my life that are undeveloped, that are untapped, that are dormant, or perhaps even just numbed out. It's quite common with leaders, right? Where do we put all our eggs in the success basket? We put all of our eggs in the career basket, and there's so little that's then left over for other parts of our lives. Just this week alone, I had 3 different leaders from 3 very different contexts talk to me about they're unhappy with their state of being in terms of where their health is at. One said, my social life is non-existent. I don't have anything outside of work. There's this growing conversation around people saying there's got to be more than this. And I think part of the contributing factor is the part of the COVID hangover is that folks, I think, throughout the pandemic, with all the time alone that they had in lockdown and being limited in what they could do, some of the normal distractions that we use to keep that question at bay because I know I certainly kept it at bay for a long time. Some of the strategies we use to keep them at bay, keep ourselves. If I keep myself busy enough, I don't have to answer that question. I can sort of I can hide from it. I can run from it. And during COVID, the ability to run went away. So I think a lot of folks during that period of time, a lot of folks reflecting, a lot of folks asking themselves some tough questions, and emerging on the other side saying, I need to redefine my life. There's got to be more than what I'm living now.
Or what they were doing was during that time, they were distracting themselves with other things, right? And
LCBO's stock share certainly went through the roof.
LCBO went up, but we saw, of course, now most people interact through tweets, through short little whatever reels, whatever kind of clips that they have, and the depth of conversation. Binging the next show, and now there's another show to binge, and suddenly we don't have to talk to people. We don't have the conversations, and after a couple of years of that as being the distraction, there are a lot of people that are sitting back going, "Is this it?
Is this it?"
Right. It's got to be more. There's got to be more.
The challenge is, and Trev, maybe to jump in on this, the challenge is that when we ask somebody, okay, are you living your kind of your best life? Are you living the most richest living experience for you? No, I'm not. Okay, that's haunting me. All right, well, how do I get there? And there are probably a gazillion different gurus out there saying, here's how to live your best life.
Yeah, you go to the bookstore, right? It's a so that's a place where you buy books. But if you go to a bookstore, right, that section
exist.
Hey, to be fair, Amazon started as a bookstore, did it not?
It's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. It can take a real dark turn, apparently. That section keeps growing and growing around self-help. Self-help, right? And there's no shortage of content there. And I don't have issues with that. Honestly, I hope we have some stuff that shows up on that shelf one day. But the challenge is when it becomes too formulaic. Right. It becomes oversimplified, where we think a quick program or a short challenge, or everybody knows about all the fad diet things, but people keep trying. Because I think there's an instinctive pull to say, I can't keep doing this. And so we look around to say, what's working? Is there anything out there? And then there's just enough marketing and messaging and examples and good reference points to go, I don't know, I'll try that. Right. But it has no staying power. In the same way that the feelings that we think are going to come from our successes have about the same amount of staying power as the solutions we're pursuing to try and offset the fact that those successes don't give us what we want.
Right.
Right.
In when I told my story a few episodes back, I talked about feeling like I was at the wheel of a boat, and a speedboat, and trying to run from my demons, and trying to be successful and do the things that other people would point to and say he's a good guy, but the boat was leaking. Right. And I think that's where a lot of us, when we talk about winners who are losing, it's not that there aren't moments of celebration, moments of great joy, moments of serenity, moments of breakthrough moments in terms of their thinking and their behavior. But because they're leaking, they haven't addressed that. It's hard to sustain. You don't live in that place. You experience it from time to time. And I think for us, when we talk about living your best life, living richly, it's moving from a place where feeling grounded, feeling serene, feeling happy is from time to time experience to becoming more the ruling principle of your life, where more elevated emotions like gratitude and kindness and joy and love, that's showing up more all the time. For me, when I think of living richly, being fully alive, fully awake, because I was asleep at the wheel of my own life for far too long, and being fully available to show up as I am, wherever I am, to be present, to be in the moment, and not checked out because my head is somewhere else, my heart is somewhere else. It's the difference between surviving and thriving. Right, which is I think a lot of folks out there that are listening, and that we speak to on a daily basis. It's more of a survival mentality than it is a thriving mentality.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit in our a conversation today around the notion of kind of some of the things that we have been using to help us in this journey. We have found that while, again, we recognize that every journey is unique, our journeys are different, and yet there were some similar themes and some similar practices that have helped us to get there. But maybe a quick question for the two of you to maybe share a little bit about kind of what's been some of the meaningful things for you. You mentioned, and I resonate so well with when you talked about fully awake. And if there's one thing that I have found for myself, that has been by making the decision, and it's a decision, to start to explore living richly, to explore and deciding to do what I need to do in order to get to that point of living my best life, or my richest life. One of the things that it is caused for me is this awakening, and I do feel
that word, awakening.
I do feel fully awake. I come into each day.
You show up so different. Like
right.
Think back, a year, 2 years anyway. Yeah. Like how you show, like you're still you, but they're like more you.
Yeah. That is a scary.
We're still trying to decide if that's a good thing.
More Rob.
No. The
Rob.
script is it's a
hashtag
great
more Rob.
Hashtag more Rob. Let's get it trending right now on social media.
On it.
But this
my follower.
Oh, your follower. Well, yeah. So that's been a benefit.
Elon Musk is going to want a piece of that.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's right. That has been a benefit for me. Is by taking this journey, I have come to a place where I truly feel fully alive in my relationships and my own curiosity and in the discoveries. Every part of my journey I'm seeing it differently. It's like there's color now. It's the Wizard of Oz. It's gone from black and white to
great
color.
description. Yeah.
And so what about for you guys? What have been some of the benefits of making the decision to take this journey?
Great question.
Loaded question.
Trevor, over to you.
Yeah. Well played. Well, beat me to it. For me, stepping out of a life and into a life, it was not as I thought I was going to want that so bad, and there's some part of me that does, and then I met myself with a host of resistance.
Right.
But I found as you put a toe in and then maybe a foot and start waiting a little bit, there is a richness and a vibrancy that has been missing through, I think, most of my life. You mentioned that notion of color as well. For me, like I've been a black and white guy for a long time, right or wrong, rule based, judgy,
logic.
Yeah,
binary.
Logical, often binary, yeah, for sure. Like I want to make the case and I want clarity and I want certainty and I want all that stuff. For me, the big leap was like gray.
Right.
And I'm like, okay,
maybe there's color.
There's more. That's right. It's my monitor has a larger range of colors that I had. But I'm working on it. But as you do that, like it truly is moving from low res to high res, from black and white to realizing that this is way more beautiful than maybe I've been able to see. And so it really is like seeing differently, experiencing things differently. It's not that all of the context has changed and become fixed and better and problems have gone away.
Right.
It's about what I see when I look at it and also what I choose to see when I look at it. I think that has been absolutely transformative, and I feel like the resolution is still pretty low. Like
it's not 4K yet.
We're not quite there yet.
We're moving our way there. For me, it's been there's so much talk about mindfulness and being present, right? And I think of where I was at before this journey, and I was mindful. I had a mind full of negative thinking and wrong beliefs, and I was talk about being present. I was present to all the mistakes of my past. Like for me to show up in the moment was difficult, and I could do it. But it was very difficult because I was obsessing a lot over past mistakes, things that I wish I could get a mulligan on and get a redo, right? Or fearful of making a mistake in the future. So I was living anywhere but here. And again, I'd have moments where I could do that, but it was difficult to show up fully as my authentic self because I was stressing out about the past or stressing out about the future. And that's what's really changed. My ability to show up and be where I am, paying attention to what I'm doing while I'm doing it. That has been the most significant shift for me. And the other would be this whole notion we've talked about. We're always waiting for something. We're often waiting for something outside of ourselves to change our state. If only I had a better job, I'd be happy. If only I was in a better relationship, I'd be happy. If only I won the lottery, I'd be happy, right? Like we have all these if onlys, and that's very cause and effect, right? We're waiting for something to cause an effect in our lives. And I think when you begin to choose your best life and create it deliberately, you move from cause and effect, waiting for something external to happen, and you start causing effect. You begin to shift your reality because you begin to build on a blueprint of your own making, and take deliberate steps toward that. Nobody can do this for you. You've got to do it for yourself. But I will say this, doing it alone sucks. Right? It's very difficult to do this on your own because, and we'll talk more about that in future episodes, but the need for a supportive community of friends. And here are my two best friends on the whole planet. This is three best friends who have been journeying, walking their own path, because you can walk your path, but we've been walking it together, and we've had some highs and we've had some lows, and it's in the course of doing this that asking ourselves that question, summer of 2021 at John's cottage, right, as we were doing some business planning. Thank you, John. Tribute to him. Beautiful cottage in Constance Bay, where we asked ourselves, what does it mean to live more richly? And that question literally sat with us and began to literally, our wrestling with the question began to affect some pretty powerful changes for all of us.
So we're using the language of creating your best life. It is deliberate. It is very specific. We know that that's what it's about, is doing something. So we clearly have a very defined model that is the only one that works for everybody.
We have your formula.
We have the quick fix formula.
Just go to our website
you
right
use
now.
the word blueprint.
Get your credit card.
You can
Ignore
go
these
to
two.
livingrichley.me and download the blueprint. No, one of the things that we have...
We don't have that. Now, we also don't have nothing.
Right, and this is where we've been wrestling. So the goal over the next number of podcasts is going to be to talk about the things that have worked for us, our blueprint, and there have been some similarities, some themes that we have found emerging that we all seem to resonate with. Maybe let's just in a way kind of put our toes in the water a bit. Let's just kind of test this out, and at a high level, let's talk about those commonalities, those themes that have worked for us. We think that they will work for others. And we do encourage, this is why we want people on this journey with us, is we want you to explore. We want you to share your own comments around the things that are working for you. And if some of these things resonate and you can use them, then great. That's the goal here, is to let's learn this method or this model or this journey. Let's take this journey together. But what are some of those common themes? What's the starting point what was the starting point for us?
Well, I think one of the essentials that is so important for someone to figure out if they're going to craft their best life is to get crystal clear on what their values are, their personal core values. This is language that is, for anybody who's a leader in business, you've probably heard the language of mission, vision, and values probably ad nauseum. And to be honest, that was the craze there for a while in the world of business. And a lot of organizations would pay consultants a lot of money to come up with some pithy words that would make up a vision statement or a value statement. And in reality, all it ended up being is material for the website. It was more marketing material than guiding material. And yet organizations that did it right, organizations that identified what was core to them in terms of their identity, in terms of their culture, in terms of what they were trying to build, moved more intentionally in that direction. And people that were part of the company, people who interacted with the company said, yes, I recognize that. I can see that in my interactions with them. Well, if this is true at the business level, right? Like so many organizations, again, the emphasis on mission, vision, and values, we're focusing here on values, so important at the business level, and yet we're not asking ourselves that question. We're how many of us as individuals have defined those for ourselves?
Yeah, it's, if you want to be an organization to succeed in the long term, so sustainable, meaningful success, you say, what do we care about? Where are we going? What is this thing? How are we going to do it? And those values become almost non-negotiable in terms of how you live it out,
Right.
how you live it out. And I think this isn't a case of saying, how do we take business practices and apply it to people? These are broader kind of models and truths that live. Say, if you don't have a picture of where you're going, really hard to get there, right? If you don't know what you value, then you don't really value anything. Everything is circumstantial. And so to be able to tune into what do we genuinely value individually, right, on our own terms, not because someone else thinks we should or that we must or that's the way you ought to do it, but you just value it like it is so central and core to how you live that out. Right. And I think there's a piece where sometimes people will confuse a little bit the what you value and the how of values, right? There's lots of things we value in life, and I think it's important to get clear on those. Those will show up for sure. But that notion of, the values that are going to determine how you navigate your life, they become your compass to say, that's my true north. That's going to help guide me in my decisions, because good values are functional. They're like, organizationally, we say they're operational. Like, they play out well when you're using them to make decisions in real time about what matters and what doesn't, and how am I going to do this and how am I not going to do this.
Well, and isn't it true though? When we don't define those, and I think when we define our values, what we're really doing is we're defining what truly matters to us. In a way, we're defining who we are,
right,
or how we express
or
ourselves,
revealing,
or how we reveal, how we reveal is comes out of our values. And when we don't take the time to identify them, to define them, to be clear on what they are, we get, I love the idea of a compass or even an anchor. All of a sudden we get shifted around. We're bouncing around, following social, whatever the, society says you should value, a lot of shoulds, right? A lot of shoulds around what should be important to you, what would matter to you. You all of a sudden you're following your parents' values, or
you'll always live a set of values.
You will always.
Right. It's either yours or someone else's. When you define your own core values, like if you don't do that, then rather than living in alignment to your true self, you're going to live out of obligation to what somebody else values. And that's where the shoulds show up. And when we live according to somebody else's values, if they align with who we are, it sort of works.
We're lucky.
But most times it doesn't. And so we are, again, we're not living our truest self. We're living a version of it, or a version that somebody else has defined. So getting clear on how I want to show up in the world, how I want to show up in my relationships, how do I want to show up in the roles and responsibilities that I have, what do I want to be guiding my results? Like, what kind of person do I want to be? Values help you define that.
Yep, without a doubt. So what would be a core value for you guys? Like, what's one for you?
Well, for me, I know one of the ones that has come out very clear for me in the last, probably even just the last few weeks, maybe the last month or so, a couple of months, has been this value of collaboration and collaborator. And, I in the past, I was defining it as community or connection. And I'm actually finding that, and this is an interesting thing about values, is as you start to move down take that journey of discovering what they are, they become clearer, more defined, or the expression of them. What I have found that in my relationships, when I am in relationships, one of the things that I value the most about the friendship and the connection I have with the two of you is the opportunity to take a journey with you, to collaborate, to learn, to grow. You guys know this is when I'm tasked to do something where I need to just kind of come up with it or create it on my own. That's the biggest frustration for me. And I often know, I'll get to that. And when are you going to get to that? Right. When I'm collaborating on something, I'm all in. And I've really noticed it is in the significant relationship that I'm in with my girlfriend and that's where it's being expressed so often is one of the things I can't get over how much I enjoy the deep, rich conversations that Wendy and I will have together, often at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. It's this whole idea that in the past you would, I need to have these conversations with my significant other. And so you would, but there wasn't any true depth to it. Whereas now we have these incredible conversations around what are you learning? And then we're talking through truths and exploring it together. And this whole collaborating on life and on experiences, just again, that fully awake and fully alive comes out of that expression of that value.
Right. That's awesome.
It's amazing.
That's awesome.
It's amazing.
I've got one that's similar, and it's connection is an important one for me. And it's interesting because for so long, I longed for connection, but I didn't. I struggled to have it again because I was because I didn't like I said in my story, because I didn't love myself. It was hard for me to show up fully, right, in any relationship. So I really struggled there. And whenever I would sense any tension in the relationship, I would withdraw. I would pull away. I would isolate because I figured that was how I would protect myself. So for the longest time, connection was more aspirational than core, right? I long to learn how to stay connected even when things get tough. And through the work now, I would say that it is core to who I am now. Now when I'm going through tough times, and I think this is the power of true core values. Like when you really get clear on what matters to you, they help you in terms of, it's like a compass. If a pilot is flying and taking off from Ottawa to Vancouver, well, the winds blowing against that plane as they're flying across the country is constantly knocking them off course. And they're constantly have to make micro corrections to stay true. Well, that's because they've got the instrumentation to do it, right? And so your values act like that instrumentation that help you stay on course when you're experiencing tough stuff in life. So I find myself on the connection piece for me, and a connection for me means I see you as you are. I hear you as you are. I value you as you are. I'm not seeing something I want to see. I'm not hearing what I want to hear. I'm not valuing you in some future state. It's about connecting with who you are right now, even if it's hard. And so in moments where I'm feeling any tension in my relationships, whether it's with my significant other, Kate, or with you guys, we've had our moments, right?
Usually
We're significant.
Oh,
don't let that go to your heads, guys.
No,
Right?
too late.
But where I'm tempted to withdraw, I'm asking myself the question, what does connection look like here? How would my value of connection influence my decisions, my actions, my reactions to this particular situation?
Yeah.
And it helps me get back on course.
And let me ask, and for you to share one of your values, but let me just say first, if encourage our listeners, if you haven't heard or taken the time to listen to Eric's story, I really do encourage you. A great example. You were certainly somebody from the external, from the, others would look at you and say, there's a guy living his richest life. There's a guy who's got it all together.
I love the look on your face right now, brother.
Appearances can be
absolutely,
deceiving,
right?
can't they?
Exactly. And so it's such a powerful story of how be careful that you don't get caught up with what you see, because it may not be truly what's happening on the inside. And that was so much of that, such a powerful story. And I just don't want to lose that moment to be able to say that. Trev, what about you? What's a value?
Privacy.
Okay.
Mind your own business.
All right.
No.
Yeah.
Humor?
I see that. No, definitely not humor.
That
No,
wasn't funny.
definitely
All
not
right,
humor.
you had collaboration, you had connection. The all mine has in common with that is it also starts with C.
All right.
But it's curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of mine too.
And
Yeah,
it's
I think it's all of ours.
And it's interesting because that's something I've had my entire life, but the nature of my experience with it has changed. And so I think for a long time, curiosity for me was about, I need to know stuff so I can be safe in my world, to bring certainty to it, I needed to have the right answers. I needed to know how to solve the right problems, like all of those kinds of things. But its tone has changed. Its nature has changed for me over the last few years. And now it's more deeply about truly understanding, what is that? Where'd that come from? How else could I look at it? So instead of it trying to bring that black and white view about what's happening in my world, it's really about trying to know it as it is. And then to start to, based on a far more flexibility as I'm experiencing things, right, I can make way better decisions about what's actually happening here, right, as opposed to trying to get to an answer or a pretty a judgmental answer or a very black and white or an overly simplified answer. It's accepting that there's not much I understand. And so why don't I engage with it, accepting that reality and bring a different level of openness to it as well? And
I love that
things.
because I think for a long time, when I looked at myself with curiosity, old Eric, it was more about criticism, condemnation, right?
The other C's.
All those negative ones. And now it's because curiosity is one of mine as well. And it starts with being curious about oneself. And rather than beating myself up when I'm, getting curious about why I do certain things or why I respond certain ways to certain situations, it used to be, see, there's more evidence that you're fucked up. Like you're right. There's more evidence to build the case that you're fatally flawed. And now it's more approaching things with a curious compassion.
I was just going to say,
right?
compassion it's like, really nicely.
I said, oh, well, that's interesting. I wonder what's behind that for me. I wonder why I'm responding like that. So again, when I find myself wrestling with self-doubt or wrestling with perhaps a painful memory or painful situation, and I'm got mixed emotions about what's going on, and I'm finding myself getting a little bit all tied up inside, to be able to get curious, but in a compassionate way. But what's behind that for me? What's going on for me? So again, this notion of values helping you self-regulate, kind of get back into your sweet spot faster because you have decided ahead of time, you've identified ahead of time what are the things that matter most.
All right, so we know values are important. We know that they are
huge.
Going to be a key piece to being able to understand that. And I know that all of our listeners are asking the question, okay, so how do we figure out what our values are? And I think it's a great question. It's a great reason why people should subscribe
right.
to our podcast.
Exactly.
Because we
Well
are
played,
going
Rob.
to
Well played.
see how I did that? We will be talking about that in a very shortly in another episode coming up. We want to begin to talk about how we came to discover what our values are. What are some
questions,
tools, all of that
resources,
stuff
all
that
of
you
it.
can use. So we will help people to really come up with the answer of what do I value in a future episode. What's next? We figured out our values. We know what our values are. We're sitting here going, okay, this is what I value. I'm still not fully living my best life.
Right. I think that was one of the first questions that emerged from our first conversation around this that summer of 2021. Soon after that initial conversation was this notion of, well, if we're going to live richly, what are the things that enrich my life versus the things that impoverish me? And I get that impoverish may sound strong, but in other words, what are the things that fill my cup? What are the things that make me leak? What are the things that
give me energy, take my energy?
What are the deposits? What are the withdrawals? And beginning to wrestle with that and think about, okay, well, what are the things that give me energy? What are the things that make me happy? And I began to reflect on that personally around both in my work and outside of work. Personally, what are all the things that make me happy? What are the things that bring me great joy when I'm working with clients and in the business? And began to document that list. And then I started to make it at the same time, what are the things personally and professionally that diminish me or impoverish me? And it was amazing as I began to answer that question, and I sat with it for quite some time, like several weeks, even into months, where I would go back and add to it, I would change it, I would edit, I would do some more thinking. And what began to emerge was some key themes, some very clear themes, that there were certain things that formed, I call it a blueprint. I don't want it to sound like it's a blueprint for everybody. It became my blueprint,
right?
My personal blueprint,
one, right?
My very personal blueprint for living richly, and it fell neatly into these into four specific themes. And all of a sudden, when you begin to get clear on the things that make you happy versus the things that impoverish you, we understand that you can't possibly live in this world and eliminate every item on your impoverished list. You're going to run into stuff that takes from you, that takes energy, that robs you in some cases, not rob you.
Not
but
that robs
you.
a bad thing.
Not that robs a bad thing. Right? But it's how do I do more of the good stuff? How do I do more of the stuff that brings me joy? And how do I actually start to design my life more deliberately around doing more of that so that my cup is full more of the time as opposed to running on fumes or running near empty.
Otherwise, we're doing it accidentally, right?
Right.
Like sometimes we'll
bump
find
into
things.
it.
Yeah,
Right.
And I know people who will say, "No, I go to this place every year because it feels good, and if I don't go, I'm not good." I'm like that. I now hear that as they know what it enriches them. Because we reckon, to your point, like the life is life, like stuff's going to happen. So none of this is to say, bad stuff won't happen, difficult things won't happen, challenging things won't happen. But what do we meet it with? Right. And if we've met it with a series of choices where we are enriching our lives, we are living in alignment with things that we care about and value, then it changes everything, changes everything. We've got so much more to draw on instead of, when you're running on fumes and people say, okay, now you need to do the monumental task. You can't.
Yeah. And the things that enrich us, again, they don't have to be monumental.
No.
That's the beauty of this is as we start to define them, right? I mean, we both have experienced in the last little bit being out kayaking.
Right.
I know you with fly fishing. Yeah. There are so many different things that we can do. One of the ones that I discovered, even in I talk about this in the relationship that I'm in, is reading together. And as Wendy and I began to go through this exercise of, well, what does it mean to live richly as a couple? One of the things, well, what enriches us as a couple? And to the point that we have made a commitment to each other to spend time reading together. And I remember yesterday, we had very busy schedules and Wendy made the comment to me, I don't know if, go ahead and do your reading. I don't know when I'll have to do mine. We may or may not be able to get a chance to do it together. Because normally, most days, we take time, usually after dinner, where we will sit on a couch. She's reading whatever she's reading. I'm reading. We're not necessarily reading the same thing. And then just having conversations. Hey, what did you learn in that last 10 pages or that last chapter? And having those, that enriches me. And so, but they're such simple actions. They don't have to be these high, complicated, take a journey to some spiritual retreat once a year. That can be one, but it doesn't have to be that deep.
Well, the fly fishing one is interesting because I came to that very late in life and I feel so good when I'm standing in the river, in the water with the fish, trying to figure it all out. There's, it's and out there casting. The thing is, if I don't catch, I've had days where people say, skunked, came home no fish. I'm like, no. For me, it's about the fishing because if it's all about the fish, like 99% of your time you're going to be unhappy. Where if it's about the fishing, it's like 99%, well, 100% of the time you're going to be happy. What was interesting was after I started doing it, going, I feel really good when I do this. Yeah. This feels really good. It was a while later, I remembered as a kid playing in the river behind Christine Chaplin's house. Christine, if you're out there, and we would spend hours and hours with, like, there were a bunch of us kids in the river, turn over rocks, standing in the river for hours, enjoying the stuff that was going on. And so I think there's also clues and cues from our past in different moments of our life where that will kind of say what would be a current day version of that. I'm not just going to go to a river now and flip over rocks and look for crayfish, but I'll tell you the fly fishing thing has been great. And the first thing you do when you get to the river is you flip over a rock to see what bugs are under it, because that's what the fish are eating. So that's how you decide what fly to put on it. So it's literally the exact same thing.
I usually all of a sudden became an outdoorsman.
Yeah. First thing I do when I get to a river is I
crack open a beer.
Beer.
Do enough of that, then you need to pee.
Right, but there's so many signals that we can see through our lives about things that have enriched us, even if they're long ago. And that one I'd totally forgotten about.
And we're going to spend a whole episode talking about, again, how do you find those things that enrich us? One of the things that I love, they should be unapologetically just embracing them. Another one that you've shared with me is you love listening to Detroit Tigers baseball on the radio.
Right.
And I'm like, who the fuck enjoys listening to Detroit? Like,
Trevor does. Trevor does.
3-hour baseball to watch a 3-hour baseball game is painful enough.
Right.
To listen to it for 3 hours, right?
Don't touch me.
That's right.
And all the baseball fans just unsubscribe.
No,
from the
they're all
podcast.
just sending me nasty tweets. I'm just getting nasty tweets. No, but you talk about how you'll walk the vineyard here and you'll be listening to a Tigers game. And I remember one time you were talking about, hey guys, you want to go to spring training? And at first our reaction was no. And then I was like, well, why would you want to do that? And you told the story of why that matters, which you'll tell in the Living Richly podcast, in the episode around finding these and discovering what enriches you. But when you started to tell that story to me, I was like, I'd like to go to a game with you. Just experience
it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, this notion, it's I was talking to a client this week. They had just come back from a 2-week vacation in Costa Rica, feeling really, really refreshed. But here he is back in the rains 2-3 days later, and he's just as stressed as before he left. I think most of the time we are trying to escape our life momentarily to find joy. When we're talking about figuring out whatever your personal living richly blueprint is, what are those things that really enrich your life, and how do you do more of them? It's about building a life you don't need to escape from. It's building a life that actually brings you great joy.
You feel like you're on vacation every day.
Exactly. Yeah. In some respect, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got our values. We've figured out what enriches us. Are we living richly? Have we created it? Are we done?
Well, here's another
We're closer.
Dimension, right? There's another third dimension to this, and I kind of stumbled on this just in my own personal work around this. One of the themes that emerged for me from my Living Richly blueprint was being well, like investing in my ongoing growth and evolution.
You're looking great.
Well, thank you, brother.
You look so young. You look so great.
Thank you. 52 in March. I'll be 52, right? I don't look a day over 52.
51 and a half. Depends, yeah.
But as I was focusing on being that best version of me and investing in me, and again, that was a real transformation, because as I told my story, investing in me wasn't even on the radar before because I didn't think I deserved it. But that's really changed. But as I began to just reflect on what the best version of me looks like, I was reminded of the 4 elements, right? Age-old symbols that have been around for so long. We're talking about the natural forces, fire, water, wind or air, and earth. And traditionally, even in the world of magic, these refer to earth refers to body, fire refers to heart, water refers to mind, and wind refers to spirit. And I began to just kind of go with that analogy of if I was to expose myself to the elements, if I was to lean into being my best self.
Can we have a mug with that?
I think we do. We should put that on a mug, and you can buy it on our store once we have that up and running. Shameless product placement. Shameless product placement. But if we could expose what would the best version of my mind? What would the question was what would my mind fully alive look like? What would my heart fully alive look like? My spirit, my body. I'd already been engaging in a lot of mindset work. That was really the foundation that led me to the breakthrough I had earlier this year. And I'd been engaging in lots of physical activity. So I would say of the 2 elements, mind and water and earth would have been the ones where I was investing the most. But I began then to really wrestle with the fact that, well, it's one thing to have a more positive mindset, to be more disciplined in my thinking, to challenge unhealthy scripts and replace them with positive ones. But if my heart is still carrying toxic emotions from my past and unforgiveness and resentment, or if I'm struggling to really relate properly or even express my emotions properly, that's the heart piece, then I got some work to do there. And what was a really interesting one was reopening the door to spirit. Because after my background, when I left the church, I would describe myself as no longer religious but spiritual. But in some ways, that was a total crock and fabrication, because I was doing nothing to lean into that. and to actually reopen the door to spirituality and what that means. And we'll talk about that in a future episode. It just opened up a whole other dimension. And it was just through doing that work and exploring and meditating on that, reflecting on that, and then leaning into even what I was reading to help fuel those dimensions that I felt I needed to focus on right now, that led me to this conviction that a real big part of living richly is having full access to the power of your mind, your heart, your spirit, and your body to experience life to its fullest. And so it came down to this little sort of meditation that I used. Right? May my mind be clear. May my heart be clean. May my spirit be connected and my body charged. And I lean into that on a regular basis, and it just leads to some interesting awakening. So I think the 4 dimensions is a great way to approach perhaps revisioning what your life looks like.
Even in a simple way, it almost allows you to have bite-size, areas or pieces that you can now express the things that enrich you. Right? How do I express these values and these things that enrich me through my body, through my mind? All of these, I just love the approach, and I know for me, it's certainly helped me get much clearer on how I'm going to do those things by being able to look and say, am I making sure that these pieces matter? And and I focused in on certain ones. Body for me was the one that I really started focusing on.
Yeah, you're looking pretty buff.
And like we're trying. I have a that was the collective we. The spiritual one, I remember at first it was like, even when you mentioned spirit, I was like, I don't want to even touch that. That's bad. All these scripts came up, right? And that's okay.
You may not be ready.
We don't have to be ready to go at all 4 in order to start with one.
Right. 100%.
Start with one and then just see where that takes you. Eventually, you may come. And that's where I'm at now, where I'm now very comfortable considering that there is a spiritual part or an element that I need to know and I need to understand, because it's going to be what allows me to live my fullest life. That wouldn't have been there 6 months ago.
Right.
Maybe not even 3 months ago. I remember you sent a note one time saying, "Hey, I said a prayer this morning," and I went, "Oh, fuck."
Oh, we lost him.
Yeah. Here we go.
Man down.
Right. And then, of course, shift that response.
Well, how excited were we for you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. How beautiful that is to be there. I love the notion of exposing yourself to the elements and what that means, and we're going to look at that. Finally, it's now taking all of that stuff and then creating some kind of, now we get into the action. We call them rituals.
Rituals or practices,
practices. Talk to me a little bit about that. What's been the experience for you as you've started to develop and formulate rituals and practices?
Yeah, I mean, rituals have been around for a long time, right? They show up everywhere, and I think it's because there's some real truths that are baked into it. Anything we do over and over becomes part of us. Anything we think over and over becomes part of us. Anything we say over and over becomes part of us. But
practice becomes permanent.
Practice becomes permanent, that's right. But we can remake and reshape any of those. And so this idea of being able to deliberately craft these and then say, how am I going to live this out to reinforce it? It's incredible, right? And it flows so well out of those 4 elements, right? I think at any given time, some of those elements are speaking more loudly in terms of what we need. And only we know what we need and what season we're in. For me, the farm has been very much a ritual. Right. It's been about tending this farm. Like the vineyard's been useful that way. You guys know, like I'm not the guy who drinks heavily. I'm not the guy who, but there's something about being out there pruning, working your way through it, the patience, the fact that you can't rush it. You just have to keep going. Right. And for me, mindset wise as well so I don't enter the vineyard until I know what it is I'm going to repeat every time I take an action, like what thought. So if I'm pruning, I don't start pruning till I know what thought I'm going to repeat, and every time I cut, I'll repeat the thought. I'll repeat it. Wow. And so that's a reprogramming of me. But to say whether it's I'm fully present, whole, and complete, or I'm good just the way I am, or whatever that is, or I choose my thoughts. Right. These are rituals repeated over and over to anchor us into these other pieces, so that it's not just a one-time exercise. Like you could probably do most of these things in a weekend, but you can't do the rituals. Right. The rituals are a life, right? So it's about how you craft your life, but you want it to flow from a good source, and that source is you, not anybody else. Like, you need to be your own source in the same way you're describing earlier. You need to be your own hero in your own story. Nobody else can come in and do this. You can have people around you supporting you, cheering for you, encouraging you, holding you accountable, all of those things as well. But you have to have that agency in that action, right? And so this is the piece where the action starts to play out.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of folks, when they're thinking of making changes to their lives, right, let's face it, we did an episode not long ago on resolutions versus revolutions, right? And we talked at length about that. But the reason that stuff doesn't work is because people go to this action step, the ritual step, the practices step too quickly without really figuring out, one, what do I value? What's really important to me? What does a rich life look like for me? What are the things that enrich me personally and professionally? What area of my life perhaps needs attention that's been either shut down or neglected or not tapped into, exposing ourselves to the elements? All of a sudden, when you start to get clear on that stuff, the practices then that you need to put in place to support that kind of life become clear. And not only do they become clear, they're highly charged with momentum because you've gotten clear on why they matter to you. This isn't just about, well, I'm a few pounds heavy, I need to get to the gym. No, like for me, one of my rituals is rigorous exercise. That is one of my core practices. But there's so much more to it than that. And we'll get into it when we dive in more deeply. But this notion of getting deep before you take a step. And sometimes you do those things in tandem. You do them, you start getting deep as you start doing them. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but I think if you fail to do the work of diving deep into why you want to do it, why it matters, any attempt at behavior modification without actually going to the belief level, the motivation level, is going to be short-lived at best. We can't behave any length of time in contrary to our core beliefs. So we have got to work on the belief stuff.
Yeah, I think sequence matters. And the reason
sequence really matters.
Well,
totally.
Yes. So
totally.
Sequence matters, but the reason I'm emphasizing that I think part is because again, and we want to. We've been saying this since the very first podcast. We are not trying to come with a bunch of answers. Right. We are coming with, here's the journey we're on. Here's what we're discovering, we're inviting you onto that journey with us to be able to explore this and we love the comments. We love the input. We love to hear from people, and we do want to encourage you. A bit earlier, I was kind of being a bit playful with the notion of, hey, subscribe to the podcast so that you can stay on this journey with us. But I do mean it. I really do want to encourage you to do so, to subscribe to our podcast. If you're watching it on the YouTube channel, make a point of not only subscribing to the channel, but liking the podcast as well, liking the video. That helps us. It helps support us in being able to get a bit more notice on YouTube and on Apple as we share these podcasts. So really do encourage you to do that and be able to participate and be part of the journey with us. Comment on the YouTube channel. You can add your comments. Want to hear about some of these things. What are their values, rituals? All of that stuff would be a great starting point to being a part of this journey with us.
And we'd ask you also, if you're benefiting from these conversations, you're enjoying the message, it's resonating with you, we'd love for you to help us get the word out by sharing it with folks that you know, sharing it out on social media, sharing it within your circle of influence. Let's get the word out there and get more people listening.
We've got lots of stuff on the website for you. It's livingrichley.me/act, ACT. And actually, Eric, one of the things I thought is I'd love to put that little mantra that you had about kind of your body, your mind, your spirit, if you're okay with it, I'd love to put that up there as well, because I think it's useful for each of us to kind of find our own expression of that, and that might be a great example as well.
Absolutely.
So we'll share that and other resources as well. Go take a look.
Here's what I'm convinced. You can create your best life. It's not going to happen overnight. It can begin at a retreat. It can begin with a conversation. but you can do it, and we invite you to do it along with us. Thanks so much for listening in on the Living Richly podcast, and we hope you join us for the next episode.